We've got, as one of our guests right now, we've got the former Speaker of the House. He also ran for president. He writes a lot of books, and his wife is set to be the ambassador to the Vatican. We're talking about Newt Gingrich. Newt, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's good to be with you guys.
Understanding Trump, by the way, still ranked in the New York Times list. Doing very good.
No kidding, it's a busy day. North Korea has made it very clear they didn't like what President Trump said a couple of days ago regarding fire and fury, and so now what they're saying is they're going to unleash a little fire and fury in the direction of Guam. Apparently, maybe next week, they could pop off 4 medium-range missiles toward Guam, not hit it. They say they will miss it by 20, 25 miles. Where are we, Mr. Speaker, right now with North Korea?
Well, look, I think, first of all, the Trump administration achieved something big last week in getting all the major nations to agree unanimously to a Security Council resolution that further tightens the sanctions. But the challenge we have is, if you take the North Koreans seriously, they're not going to back down. And so the question becomes, then what? Every time I see newspapers ask this question, you have 12 so-called experts who say, well, we have to negotiate. We've been negotiating for over 20 years. And while we negotiate, they're building weapons. There's one study out yesterday estimating they may have as many as 60 nuclear weapons. And I think people are just not prepared for that reality. I hope, and my newsletter tomorrow from Gingrich Productions is going to outline, we need to evaluate what is an American city worth. It's not about Guam. It's about Seattle or Cincinnati or Chicago or New York. And what's an American city worth? And we had better build the defensive systems that'll stop any attack on an American city, whether it's from Iran or it's from North Korea or any other rogue nation. And I think that this has got to be done on a crash basis, cutting through the red tape, much like the Manhattan Project in World War II or the Apollo Project to go to the moon. We need a dramatically better defensive capability because these guys may be serious. Now, I hope diplomacy works, but we better have a plan for if diplomacy doesn't work. I don't care if they fire missiles in international waters as a demonstration effect. We fire ICBMs into the Pacific on a regular basis. I do care that we're not taking seriously that we may need a non-diplomatic solution.
Japan did say that they would not, if anything's heading towards Guam, they would knock out of the sky with their missile defense systems. I think possibly the magic bullet might be a bolstering up of missile defense from all our allies, from Taiwan to South Korea to Japan. That is the last thing China wants, and China is the only one that could control in a non-violent way North Korea.
Well, I'm not sure even China can control them. I think the North Koreans are off on their own. I think that they have an ideology which is, frankly, anti-Chinese, anti-Japanese, anti-American.
They need oil.
I think that they need oil. I mean, if you're prepared to really close down the economy decisively, basically the equivalent of a blockade, you might be able to have some impact. But remember, if you do that right now and they decide to react out of desperation with nuclear weapons, we're not prepared today for a North Korean attack on the scale that they could launch. And I think that that's why, personally, I'd like to see us use this negotiating period to dramatically expand our defensive capabilities before we push the North Koreans to the wall. The ideal thing would be to replace the current leader with a military coup, but I'm not sure in their police state that that's a practical solution.
I want to read you a few statements from Secretary Mattis, who said that they're going to lose, that their regime and their people will be destroyed should they send a missile our way. He also said the DPRK should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. What's your reaction?
Well, look, Secretary Mattis is a very, very smart man, and he is sending a very powerful warning. But we're not prepared today, either in Seoul, Korea, which is very close to the 38th parallel and would risk enormous collateral damage, or in our own major cities, to deal with the possible outcome. Could the United States destroy North Korea? Yes. What would the collateral effect be? Can we destroy them fast enough that they don't get a single missile off? Are we totally confident that we could knock down even one missile? We've had about a 50-50 success rate with our anti-ballistic missile systems. I really worry that the cost of a nuclear weapon in a city is so horrendous.
Yes.
There's so many 100,000 people who are going to die that we're not taking seriously blocking that from happening. We're not taking the steps we could take given our technological advantages.
Donald Rumsfeld was the one who said build up missile defense, and he could not get the financing to follow through on it, and now we're in a breakneck pace to catch up. But go ahead, Steve.
Let's talk, Mr. Speaker. You were talking about replacing the leader. I think you were talking about Kim Jong-un a moment ago, but there are some people in the United States who would like to see the leader in the U.S. Senate replaced because he could not get repeal and replace done. Mitch McConnell was out earlier this week at a Rotary Club meeting and said that the president had excessive expectations and unrealistic deadlines regarding how the Senate operates. And then he just tweeted out about an hour ago, can you believe that Mitch McConnell, who has screamed repeal and replace for 7 years, couldn't get it done, must repeal and replace Obamacare? What's going on between Mitch McConnell and the President of the United States?
Well, I mean, frankly, as a Republican who's been around since before Ronald Reagan and has been through several very successful waves of change, including both Reagan and the contract with America, this whole thing is absurd. For every Republican who voted no, there were 16 Democratic senators who voted no. Conservatives want to have, put their fire on somebody, take all the 10 senators in the Democratic Party who were in states that Trump carried who voted no. The fact is, with a very narrow margin, 52 people, Mitch McConnell got 49 out of 52. And I think the president can't disassociate himself from this. He's part of the leadership team. He's not an observer sitting up in the stands. He's on the field. It was a collective failure. Both the Trump administration and the Republicans in the Senate failed. But to get involved in shooting at each other when there were 16 Democrats voting no for every single Republican who voted no is goofy.
But don't you think the majority leader...
No, I just say it's goofy.
Right. I agree with you. You look at it as an overview. But for the majority leader to say, I have a rookie president who has unrealistic expectations, I think that's the first shot. It's almost... And the president did speak to him offline, and then he tweeted for everyone to see. What about Mitch McConnell with all those years of experience? How does he benefit from those remarks?
Well, he doesn't benefit from those remarks, and I suspect, knowing Mitch, if he had to do it over again, he'd probably take them back. I think he believes it. And look, I've said all along, and I've been on this show saying, I think the initial setting these deadlines, when you don't have a clear plan, when you don't have an absolute majority, and there's really not a solid majority in either the House or the Senate. And these kind of deadlines create these expectations, and then it becomes a crisis, and then somebody has to have failed. Replacing Obamacare, which is 1 out of every $5 in the U.S. economy, life and death for the American people, unbelievably complicated, from Medicaid to Medicare to the various things that are in Obamacare itself. This may take 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it may take 10 or 12 different bills. I'm not sure anybody's smart enough to write a single bill to replace Obamacare in one giant step, and I'm not sure you can get a majority in the House and Senate to do it if you could. What bothers me is we got a lot of things we have to learn how to do if we're going to be an effective governing majority, and I'm frankly equally afraid that they're going to mishandle the tax cuts exactly the way they mishandled health care, and if that happens, we'll be at the end of the year with a disaster. And I really hope they'll take some lessons from the first 7 months and apply them to writing a tax cut bill that actually works.
We'll see. We'll see. You wrote an op-ed on FoxNews.com, and the title is Rahm Emanuel is the renegade mayor of a renegade city. Why do you feel that way?
By the way, I got that directly off your show last Friday. You had a guest on who talked about the notion we should quit talking about sanctuary cities, which sounds noble. We ought to talk about renegade cities, because they're actually adopting the old segregationist policy of interposition. They're arguing that they have the right to interpose their city government against the federal government. And I pick on Rahm Emanuel deliberately because the city with the most people killed by guns, the city with the most people shot last year is Chicago. Over 4,000 people shot, over 700 people killed. Why does Rahm Emanuel think they need more criminals? Remember, this entire fight is over, can the U.S. government pick up an illegal alien in jail to get him out of the country? And Rahm Emanuel's position is, no, we have to put him back on the streets of Chicago. Why, with 4,000 people shot and 700 people dead, would the mayor of a city say, please, let me keep all my illegal aliens who are, remember, we're talking about convicted criminals here. I just think it's a totally goofy position on Rahm Emanuel's part, and I think we ought to highlight it. I think it's also outrageous that city governments believe they, A, can interpose between the federal government and the law, and B, that the federal government ought to send them money anyway.
That's right.
I mean, the first steps which Attorney General Sessions are taking, these are very modest steps in the right direction.
Well, Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House, he not only watches Fox and Friends, he quotes it and then writes op-eds about it. Sir, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you. Great to see you.
From